Number 2 on my list of the best Derby fields of the past 20 years, you have to go to the year 2007. The year 2007, I graduated from high school. I was not into horse racing at the time. I wasn't paying attention. Didn't really register with me. I would turn it on if there was a Triple Crown chance or whatever the case may be, as was the deal in 2008 with Big Brown. But this group of horses, for me, once I got into the game, I needed to kind of retroactively go back and learn about the significance of this field and the horses that ran in this race and what they went on to do. Obviously, a horse named Street Sense was the winner of the 2007 Derby, trained by Karl Nafzger. Really talented racehorse, a brilliant 2-year-old, went on, won the Derby as a 3-year-old. And not only did he win the Derby as a 3-year-old, but then he went on to win some of the other big prizes, most notably the Grade 1 Travers up at Saratoga. But prior to that, he did win the Jim Dandy as well, the prep leading into that. He ran well in some other races, but I think it's safe to say he will not be the most remembered name out of this group. And this is a pretty darn good group of horses. These names are names that they're going to ring a bell for anyone. The reason I didn't put this group number 1 is because for the vast majority, their success all came as 3-year-olds. And there wasn't a ton, with the exception of the big name, that really went on as older horses to do anything of substance. So 2007 for me landed as the number 2 group. You had Street Sense win the 07 Jim Dandy and the 07 Travers. You had Hard Spun come out of the Derby. He ran as well as he did in the Kentucky Derby. He finished second at 1.25 miles. He comes back later on that year, wins the 2007 King's Bishop, which is now the Allen Jerkins, at 7 furlongs at Saratoga. He wins the 2007 Kentucky Cup Classic over Street Sense. So Hard Spun was a proper horse that could do a little bit of everything. But then the big name, I mean, the name of this group, and there's no real two ways around it, I don't think. And if it's not Gunrunner as the biggest name on this list, and it's not American Pharoah as the biggest name on this list, I think the only other alternative would be Curlin. And Curlin, again, he was so lightly raced going into the Kentucky Derby. It doesn't work out for him. He comes back 2 weeks later. He wins the Preakness. Later on that year, as a 3-year-old, he takes on Elders. He wins the 07 Jockey Club Gold Cup. He wins the 07 Breeders' Cup Classic. And then 2008, he has another phenomenal campaign top to bottom. He wins the 08 Dubai World Cup, the 08 Stephen Foster, the 08 Woodward, the 08 Jockey Club Gold Cup. He tried turf at one point in there. I mean, this is when Curlin really sort of established himself as not only, I would say, the best 3-year-old of that generation, but he established himself as a legitimate sort of horse that you can stack up over the past handful of time, however many years you want to use, and say he could have run any one of these years, any one of these generations against any one of these bests and still had as good a chance, if not better than anyone else, to run his race and get the job done. Curlin, obviously we know now at this point he is an all-class, world-class sire. His offspring can do a little bit of anything. I think they're even a little bit better on grass. That's usually one of the first things that my eye goes to if I can see a Curlin stretching out, going 2 turns on turf for the first time. He's an all-world sire. He can do a little bit of everything. Doesn't stop there, though. There's some other really big names here. Circular Key. Okay, didn't win a ton coming out of the Derby, but he did win the 2008 New Orleans Handicap, so he adds to the list. Tiago. In 07, he beats older horses in the Goodwood, and then 08, he comes back as a 4-year-old and wins the Oaklawn Handicap down at Oaklawn Park. Nothing to sneeze at. Any given Saturday, he comes out of the Derby, wins the 07 Dwyer as a 3-year-old, obviously, and then comes back and wins the 07 Haskell against many of these contemporaries. So he established himself as a legitimate threat. Any other year, I feel like you could make the case that one of these 3-year-olds probably runs the table. But because this group was so deep and could do a little bit of everything, I think that to me is the hallmark of a really talented crop. By the way, Any Given Saturday also ended up winning the 07 Brooklyn. So it's not as though he was... I feel like some of these horses, they may not get the due that they deserve. And I really firmly believe that. And it's luck of the draw. What year do you land in? Do you land in a group, of 3-year-olds? And I don't mean this in a negative light, but let's go to California Chrome. California Chrome's Derby group and the horses that he ran against in the Preakness and the Belmont really haven't come back to... They haven't acquitted themselves really well over time. Tonalist is a solid horse, no question about it. Wicked Strong was fine, but when you see the horses that California Chrome beat and what he was able to then go on and do, he's part of the reason he's not in my top 5 as far as the Derby fields are concerned. The rest of the field just didn't do much as they got older. This is a group of horses that theoretically, you put any one of these in that sort of California Chrome group, they could very easily have done what Chrome did against his 3-year-olds. I'm not suggesting they all would have turned into the world beater that he did, but if you take a hard spun out of this group and you run him in that group against the horses that California Chrome ran against in 2014, perhaps you get a different situation where a hard spun can go and win a race like the Kentucky Derby and can go and win a race like the Preakness. It's nothing more than barroom talk, but I think that's when I go through, and it's kind of a similar assessment when you're just handicapping in general. I try to look at it and say, well, who did you run against? Because if you ran against a bunch of inferior foes, well, yeah, you accomplished. You can't control who you run against, but it's one of those things that if you're judging it and we're handicapping it, you need to at least use your competition as a barometer and see where you would stack up in theory. And with a group like this, they all ran against each other and they were all top flight runners. It doesn't stop with any given Saturday. No biz like showbiz. One of my favorite angles for any of these races, like leading into the Derby, running in the Derby or the Preakness or the Belmont or whatever the case may be, are horses that are very obviously turf horses. But the connections have fever, and we get it. You want to take a shot. You got a really talented animal. You want to try to find out if you can run in the Derby and pull an Animal Kingdom or someone like that. But more often than not, their main surface of choice is going to be grass. So they run through that, then you get them back over to the turf. Not only do they get back to their preferred surface, but in all likelihood, they've been facing better horses than the turf horses that they'll be facing at that point then. So no biz like showbiz, he kind of checks that box where you look at it and say, and I know he had some feet problems from everything that I read, that the turf was a little bit kinder on his tootsies. He gets over there to the grass, 07 Hall of Fame, 07 Kent, 07 Jamaica, which I believe now is the Belmont Derby. I mean, he ended up being a really nice 3-year-old turf horse. Then you have Tufflesburg, who won the 07 Woody Stevens at 7 furlongs. And I'm pretty sure Scat Daddy was also in this group. We know Scat Daddy ended up being much more of a sort of a sire influence. He may have been the best sire out of this entire lot. But the point is, this 07 group, really, really strong race, top to bottom. Any other year, if any one of them caught a softer group, who knows what they could have accomplished. But they ended up running against one another. And for me, I could have easily swapped the 3 with the 2. I could have easily swapped the 2 with the 1. I feel like this top 3 group for me was very, very difficult. And I'm sure I'm going to catch some flack when I do end up naming and showing you who my number 1 is. But this 07 group, I would strongly encourage you to take a look and see what they were capable of. Because on their best day, this might have been the most talented group top to bottom as 3-year-olds. The reason I couldn't put them number 1 is because as a 4-year-old, the exception of Curlin, they were all good, the ones that did run. But I think this next group, they may have a little bit more as far as substance, not only as 3-year-olds, but moving on as to 4-year-olds. So let's take a look. My number 1, as far as my opinion, for the number 1 field quality, for the field and then going forward, the past 20 years of the Derby.